Well, hello everyone. This is Cheryl York, and I'm coming this week to do another But God testimony. This is actually one of mine and Jerry's, and I wanted to go ahead and share this one because even though I've actually been interviewed on another podcast for this, it's just such a fabulous story. In fact, I'm going to show you where to find it if you want to read it, but I don't even literally need to read it to you. It is that imprinted in my mind. It was just such a fabulous, fabulous story. First, let me go ahead and share with you um, the But God blog. All right, there we are. And so you should see two dogs, two handkerchiefs. Eventually, we'll go ahead and get to that one. Let's look here at the left. This is the But God blog. At the left, you can see that I started this back in July of 2024. Somebody sent me a wonderful testimony, and it was just so beautiful. I knew I had to share it, and I really couldn't figure out exactly how. So I thought, why not create a, well, a testimony page or a testimony blog. I had a regular blog at the time, but why not create a blog and start letting people add them? And I'll start even adding my own. Within his testimony that he sent me was but God, a but God moment. So that's why I ended up naming it that. But you can see that there's quite a number of testimonies that are on there. In fact, this was probably the most recent, which was May 4th of 2026. And if any of you would like to share a testimony that you would like maybe to me to do a podcast about or something, please let me know. People really do love to read these things. And you know what? The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So when we share testimonies, we are literally prophesying into the life of others. They can grab a hold of that promise. They can grab a hold of what happened, of the miracles and signs and wonders, and they can accept it for themselves. So we've got to understand what the purpose of testimonies is. It doesn't do any good if you just keep it to yourself. God does something wonderful in your life and you never say anything. You never tell anybody, you never testify of it. No, we're supposed to. We go through tests and then it becomes a testimony. So I hope that you'll consider sending something my way. You can very easily find me by going to americareimagined.faith, and my email address is all over the place there. All right. Now, I've already written up here in the search suit and tie. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now, this is actually an AI generated image that I did a few days ago. This is actually my husband, believe it or not. That's the best that they could do with his face, but it was his picture, his glasses, his hair that they used in it. So I just thought that it came out pretty good. In fact, I've been using AI quite a bit today. Those of you that are afraid of it, yes, there are reasons to pray, bind, do all these different things. But God can use AI for good things as well. I'm going to go ahead and read the preface here. It says, Jerry and I have both been previously married. I did not marry Jerry until after I was 30 years old. He had one daughter with his previous wife, but she wasn't in his life at that time. And I had no biological children when we married. Because of both of our past, Jerry being abused and me being molested, we decided that when we began having children, we would never allow them to be babysat, not even by family. This one decision became a commitment and a huge sacrifice as well because only one of us could work at a time. So the other would always be home, and our income would reflect this, obviously, for anyone it would. But the Lord gave me a dream that eventually changed things for us for many, many years and beyond. So anyway, at the time, I'm going to go ahead and skim through it because I don't want to forget anything. But At the time, I was an advertising manager for a newspaper in Cambria. When my husband and I first met and married, he was working two jobs himself, one full time and one part time to make ends meet. We had our first child just over 9 months after we got married. The decision that we made that day challenged us pretty quickly. Were we going to stay with it or bow the knee to mammon? We again confirmed our commitment to raising our children without babysitters. We were never going to put our children in danger with family or friends, as both of us had been. Me several times with babysitters. Many, I'm sure, think that this was extreme. We wouldn't even allow family to babysit them. No, there was too much of a risk, as I have been molested by several men as a child, including by babysitters, family members, and even in my own home by my stepfather from about 14 to age 16. When you understand that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, Ephesians 6:12, you understand that we were in no way standing against people. We loved our families, but we lived through some difficult things as children and youth. And we then realized that even good people can be used by Satan to try to destroy children at a young age. I stayed home for a little while, of course, on paid pregnancy leave, but then I had to go back to work. But I very quickly found my heart was no longer in it. I had loved my job so much before having my daughter, and now all of a sudden I really didn't want to be there at all. I just wanted to be home with her. My husband and I made the decision that even though I had been making more than him because I was a manager, he would be the one to work full time and I would stay home. From that point on in our marriage, and then of course having three more kids, there was always only one of us working. Here we are over, 31 years later, and literally we still never had needed babysitters or daycares or any of those things. We lived hand to mouth. We had to have help from churches. There's things that we, really, really had to believe God for, cars and a lot of different things through the years. But I'm just saying that, we stuck to it after we made that decision. Times got pretty tough no matter what job my husband had, and we were literally taken care of and provided for supernaturally by the Lord. The Bible says he will open up the windows of heaven, Malachi 3:10, and we believe the windows of are his people whom he moves on to give. Family help, friends help, groceries arrived on our doorstep time and time again. Checks showed up in the mail or cash was handed to us in church by precious people. I've always been a dreamer, and God often spoke to me through dreams. Many have come to pass in my life, and this story is one of them. We were struggling more than usual because my husband was having a tough time with a job that he actually liked. He ended up with a supervisor who hated him because he was a Christian and treated him badly, always trying to get him fired. It was obvious to us that it was persecution, so we prayed through it and kept believing that God was working in it. He endured and he endured because we needed money as a family. However, there was an end to the rope eventually, and he'd finally gotten there when one night, as he was working as a security officer in a highly classified building, he was being told that he wasn't doing things he was supposed to do. Let me explain. He had an hourly round. He had to walk to check rooms that were off limits in this building to people without certain security clearances. And each time he checked a room, he was to call that same supervisor and tell him whether the room was clear or inhabited. And because it was nighttime, who was there, if there was somebody there. This was definitely not the first time this happened. He'd accused my husband of not checking all the rooms before, and at first it caused confusion. He began questioning himself on whether he had called in. So he really started paying attention because he didn't want to lose this job. All night long, he'd been checking and calling in, and towards the end of the night, the supervisor jumped all over him, saying that he hadn't called any rooms in when he knew he had, and had in fact just talked to him minutes before from a room. Needless to say, it was the last straw for my husband, and he did something we never thought was possible. He threw the keys across the room and told the guy he was done. He wasn't going to be treated this way any longer, and he wasn't going to be lied about to his supervisors when the guy knew full well he'd just done everything as he was supposed to. My husband knew it was his word against his supervisor, and he felt he might lose, but he didn't do it anymore. He couldn't do it anymore. It was a tough hour-long drive home to tell me that he no longer had a job. And on top of that, he'd probably never work in security again because you never walk off a site before you are done with your shift in security, let alone throw the keys across the room. We'd always lived paycheck to paycheck, so this was obviously devastating news to me, but I couldn't be angry with him. I agreed with him, and had it been me, might not have been able to continue working through it all with this supervisor as long as he'd endured it. I'm a little bit less patient, maybe. God was teaching me love, forgiveness, and faith for sure. The dreamer cometh. Fear tried to overtake me. How would we pay our bills? How could we have enough food? Would he be able to find another job in security? One of us had to work. Was God telling me that it was time for me to go back to work? A lot of questions and some tears as I prayed, but God gave me peace. And then he reminded me of a dream he'd given me months prior. I had told my husband about it and written it down as I always did. And even though by this time God had already proven to me that he speaks through dreams, I hate to admit that it seemed pretty impossible. So I brushed it off a bit because in our situation it seemed wonderful but also crazy at the same time. Today, I do not remember the entire dream, but I do remember that I woke up with a knowing inside of me that God had just told me that he was somehow going to give my husband a $4 an hour raise. This was literally unheard of in the line of work he'd chosen. He'd already been working in a position of making pretty decent money, and he wasn't even a supervisor. But a $4 an hour increase? Wow, it was definitely a dream. Right away, my husband got out there and started applying to other places. He had a family and knew he had to find another job, so it was never put back on my shoulders. He'd left the job, and I think in some ways condemnation kind of sets in because you think you did something so wrong. Maybe God won't help you, and even He will discipline you for this. But he had to go and find a job to provide for his family, and he had to keep believing as well. He applied at several security companies and was called in for an interview and called me on the phone saying he'd be home soon but had to wait to receive his uniform and fill out some paperwork. The wage was even less than he'd been making at the previous job, but he felt he had to take it so we wouldn't get too far behind or even go without. I was, of course, happy that he'd found another job so quickly, but my mind couldn't help but question that dream. Lord, this doesn't make any sense to me. You told me that Jerry was going to get a $4 an hour raise, and now he has left that job and is taking one that pays even less. I don't understand what is happening. This, of course, was in the early years when God was still teaching me not only that He spoke to me through dreams, but that I had to come to a place where I was given a dream and then fully trusted and believed Him over any and all circumstances. Kind of like the three dreams I had about my sister and I being pregnant at the same time. I would call and tell her the dream, and she would say, "No, I'm not pregnant." It wasn't until after I had my first baby that I found out that my sister was pregnant and actually was for at least a month or so while I was. We were actually pregnant at the same time. My point is, I was still learning to trust that God spoke to me through dreams and that they could come to pass and weren't just pizza dreams. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when Jerry walked in and with his new uniforms in hand. Realize here that it's probably only been about 2 days since he quit the other job. Before he could even say hello or give me a kiss, or our phone rang, the landline was ringing. He put his new uniforms down and answered it, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Woo hoo! God came through as it was his former supervisor or superior supervisor, not the guy that was mean to him and everything, but even higher up. He somehow found out what was happening and why my husband quit the way that he did, and he actually apologized to him for what he'd gone through. He told him that the other supervisor had been demoted and he wanted to offer him a completely different job. No more working the night shift and checking rooms. He wanted to give him a position where he would work Monday through Friday, day shift, sitting at a desk all day, and he would be wearing a suit and not a uniform at all. He wanted to know if he was interested, and of course, my husband said yes. After telling him all of the information, when he would start, etc., he told him what his new wage would be, and it was almost $4 an hour more than he'd been making. I think to be exact, it was 3.75 an hour. You might be thinking, wait a minute. The Lord told you $4 an hour more. Well, I'm not done yet. He was also given what is called a stipend, which I'd never even heard of at the time, to help my husband keep up his suits through dry cleaning weekly, which added up to a few $100s more a month in a separate check. In the end, it was well over $4 an hour more than he'd been making in the previous position. Setting the table. As believers, we know that God's word says that he will set a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Psalm 23:5. Because of the additional income, at least once or twice a week, my husband was now able to go out to lunch rather than just take a lunch. There was an Asian restaurant near the office that he loved, so it became a weekly thing, and wouldn't you know it, God set that table. The former supervisor, the one that had been mean to him, who had given him so much trouble and tried to get him fired with lies until he pushed so hard that my husband finally quit, saw him in this new blessing. That same guy who had been demoted for what he'd been doing still worked in the same area and was now either walking by my husband's new place up, new new office, the place of business that he was working in. He was sitting at a desk in an office in a suit, believe it or not, where he could clearly see him sitting at this desk through the window, or even better, was running into him eating at the Asian buffet, sometimes a few times a week, and now he saw him all dressed up in a suit and tie. Now he wasn't looking at the guy he'd bullied and lied about. He was looking at a guy who'd been promoted and was not wearing that same old security outfit, but was working for the same company in a brand new job, eating out and enjoying life like he hadn't been before because of financial hardships and working on a night shift with a nasty supervisor. The tables were truly turned. God promoted my husband and demoted that supervisor. Pride truly does come before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Praise be to God. So that is the story. Now, this I wanted to show you is on Declaring Your Destiny. This is Brandon, and he and I have become friends, and he actually uh, did this in podcast form. He interviewed me quite a few months ago, and he titled this one "You're Getting a Raise," so you can watch his. And then down here below, I will probably also add my podcast that I'm doing right now. I think in this one, because I'm actually reading it, I have been a little bit more detailed. I said I wasn't going to do that, and then I did it anyway. It was just right in front of me, and it just felt like I should go ahead and let you know exactly. The only thing that I can think of that I said in Brandon's that I didn't mention here was that when he was doing that security job with that nasty supervisor, he wasn't just walking in and checking rooms. I mean, it was more of a tedious thing. I mean, he had to put on a white like suit. My husband had to put on a white suit over him and everything. They were called clean rooms, and he had to do that every time he went in. So it was a little bit more detailed and everything, but he did have to go in room after room after room and make a call, tell his supervisor that he had checked it, nobody was in there, what was going on, and that evil, wicked, mean, nasty supervisor didn't like him. Was it because he was a believer? We don't even have any idea. But the reality is, God is for his children, and you cannot mess with his kids. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and push the stop share. And I created this back here. Let me move out of the way with AI generated things. I just put in uh, give me a picture of a security officer in a blue shirt throwing keys across the room, and that's what they came up with. So anyway, it's supposed to be my husband, but this guy definitely looks a little bit older than my husband does. But anyway, that is my testimony for today. This is literally, I have so many wonderful testimonies, so many, but I'm telling you. This one is just amazing. I mean, come on. When I first had that dream, I was like, $4 an hour? Really? It was back, like I said, when I was, much, much younger in the Lord. And I literally thought things were like pizza dreams and stuff. But that's how God started teaching me how to hear Him. Write it down. It might come to pass later. You might be able to interpret it. Another good reason to write things down is because how you think something and how you would actually say it in writing it out sometimes are two different things. You might find a number, you might find a color, you might find a word that you would use that really stands out to you. That's why it's so important to write it down. Even if you don't have, say you have a dream and you don't wake up remembering all of it, write down what you remember and ask the Holy Spirit if there's something else to that dream that the Lord was trying to say to me, bring it back to my memory. Okay? But don't just disregard your dreams because far too many people are sitting around waiting for God to speak to them, you know, audibly, and even Johnny Enlow recently did a podcast, and he said, really, you don't want God to speak to you audibly. When he spoke to people audibly, things didn't come to pass that quickly. I mean, there were corrections, all of that kind of stuff. Let God speak to you through dreams, and be patient with you to learn how to interpret and what he might be saying. And plus, he wants us to seek him out. He wants him to try to, he wants us to try to look for him and get into the word and pray and intercede and ask for the Holy Spirit's help. So it's very important. I've been having a lot of dreams lately, and I've just kind of woken up with pieces, but those pieces usually means something to me. And so I really, really, really want you to pay more attention to your dreams. Not all dreams are pizza dreams, okay? So I want to remind you that my website again is americareimagined.faith. You can find quite a number of things there. I have my newsletters there. The It's Going to Be Biblical newsletters that go out Monday through Friday. I have my newsletter archives there. Well, I just said that my newsletter's there. I meant the Prophecies Being Fulfilled blog is there that you can click on. I post the Prophecies Being Fulfilled still. I've been doing it since about 2021, and I've got it on X, Telegram, Zap It, Getter, and True Social. I post on all five of those, and then I also created a blog so that those who won't go on social media can still look and see. Sometimes 20 to 24 a day, at least 5 times a week. So I have quite a few on there. You can see some of them are just names that are in the news. Some are things that are starting to be worked on. You can see that they're in the works, and some are actually things that have come to pass through Julie Green, through Amanda Grace, through Hank Kuhneman, through Brandon Biggs, through several of the prophetic voices that are out there right now. Back in the day, they used to have only one prophet. Well, we're in the New Testament where the Lord poured out his spirit and his sons and daughters are prophesying. And all of us, women and men, are supposed to be prophesying. And that means there's quite a few prophets out there right now that are speaking, and sharing what the heart of the Lord is for what's to come. So, expect great things, expect miracles, expect signs, expect wonders, expect healings, expect a wealth transfer, expect wonderful things, and expect, just like I always do, that my dreams are going to come to pass, whether it's the next day or whether it's many years away. I know that every dream that the Lord has given me that I've written down is going to come to pass in some form because I know He was speaking to me. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Love ya. Can't wait to get back with you next week. I'll probably be doing a prophecies being fulfilled this weekend. So we'll see you again soon. Bye for now. Bye bye.